On today's show, should the Houston Rockets make a move to add some shooting to this roster? We'll take a look at a couple possible trade targets and more on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Drop us a comment while you're there. Share some thoughts on these trade scenarios we're going to talk about. Do a drive-by, say go Rockets. Also, be sure to subscribe to our new daily Locked On Rockets newsletter. We're going to get into a couple hypothetical trade scenarios here. Should the Houston Rockets make a move to add some shooting to this roster? As well as we'll take a look at the Rockets-Clippers matchup part 2 as they get their first taste of NBA Cup action this season. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thanks so much for getting your day started with Locked On Rockets, for being an everyday, or whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being one of our awesome everydayers. All right, so as it stands, the Rockets are sitting at 8-4. They've had a successful start to the season, despite the fact that they have shot the ball so poorly. They are a bottom three-point shooting team in the association, shooting a paltry 31.9% from behind the arc. They're bottom 2 in effective field goal percentage. The only team worse than them right now is the Portland Trailblazers. And despite those numbers, they are still 14th best offense in the NBA. They have a top 6 net rating. They're the 6th best net rating in the NBA this season through 12 games. They've had a lot of success despite the shooting woes. Now, you could chalk some of that up to guys are all slumping at the same time. That's definitely a plausible explanation. You could also just look at this roster and be like, damn, there's just no shooting on this roster. Like, the Rockets have a roster that doesn't have enough shooting on it. So we're going to take a look at, I think the answer is very simple. The Rockets do have a lot of matchable salary. They've got pieces. They've got guys that could be serviceable rotation players for other teams that are kind of buried in the depth chart. And I do think it would make a lot of sense for the Rockets to potentially swing a trade to add a serviceable shooter, in particular, a movement shooter, somebody that they can really rely on, draw up some plays, somebody who can help space the floor and be a reliable kind of release valve offensively for guys like Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. And that would help take this team to the next level. I'm not a big fan of the idea of continuing to hoard assets or kick the can down the road and, we got to hold on to every single draft pick or whatever to try and make a play for a star player. Like, if you have the chance to add a rotation piece, a guy who plays, anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes a night, who can be a knockdown 3-point shooter for this team this season and still be a serviceable defender, the Rockets could be, they could be a top 5 team this season and seriously make some noise as the young guys continue to grow and impress. You got to strike when the opportunity's there, and you don't want to continue to just wait and bide your time for the perfect trade to present itself. At least that's how I feel. I'm curious your thoughts, though. Would you like to see the Rockets make a trade? We're going to get into a couple hypotheticals here that the Rockets could potentially explore, but I have to put a disclaimer here at the top. For whatever reason, this season, content creators across the globe have got it in their head that Tari Eason, for whatever reason, can be had for like nothing this year. Every year there's like 1 or 2 players that pop up on these content creator radars or whatever, and they're just like, oh yeah, just trade like a future first rounder and you get Tari Eason and he'll be like an immediate, and like their Bleacher Report did like a couple hypothetical trades, like one to the Phoenix Suns and one to the Philadelphia 76ers, where the Rockets got back like straight up garbage for Tari Eason. I'm going to say this loud and clear for anybody listening. Tari Eason is not going anywhere. Tari Eason's not being traded. And if he were to be traded, he would bring back a lot more value than what these hypothetical trades are proposing. The value suggested in these trades is flat out disrespectful. Shout out to friend of the program, Chris White, Firebear on Twitter, who shared the thought that, how you evaluate Tari Eason is this season's like NBA litmus test. And I could not agree more, right? Tari impacts winning at the highest level. He's not going anywhere. Rockets aren't trading him for like some distant, future first round draft pick. Where it's not happening. Get it out of your head. So with that, I do have to give some props because this first trade proposal that I'm going to talk about was suggested by Bleacher Report, so they weren't all bad. But the first one that I'm pulling up for us here is going after Miami Heat's Duncan Robinson. The trade proposal was Rockets would get Duncan Robinson. They would ship out Jock Landale, Jayshawn Tate, and a future second-round draft pick. Now, this trade was met with a little bit of skepticism from some Rockets fans, a bit of a polarizing trade. I don't know why. This trade to me is a slam dunk for the Rockets. In fact, I would argue that, if I were the Rockets, I'd be willing to even include, an additional second or multiple more second round draft picks to be able to get this trade done. And this is weird because I've gone back and forth on Jock Landale a couple days now, but at the end of the day, realistically, the Rockets are bought in on what Steven Adams can bring to this team. They're allowing him the opportunity to rehab, get back to full speed. And once Adams is back to, more so his normal self, I do think some of the defensive lapses that we've seen so far will not be as big of an issue. And again, he does provide a huge benefit offensively to this team. So you have Jock Landale, who's a very serviceable backup big man, can easily be a replacement level starter in a pinch. We saw that last season. And the Miami Heat don't really have a great backup big behind Bam Adebayo at this point. Their depth chart at the 5 spot is not great. They've got Thomas Bryant. Khalil Ware is there. And while he's got a bright future, like he's just maybe not ready to contribute at the highest level right now. So to me, Miami walks away with 2 guys that can be plugged into their rotation, Jock, Jayshawn Tate. You get the future asset. And for the Rockets, they add some much-needed shooting in Duncan Robinson. And Robinson isn't, a turnstile defensively. He's not going to be a guy clamping up on his own. He's not going to be a guy that carries the defensive identity of a team, but he is coming from a Miami Heat team that does pride itself on playing some hard-nosed, gritty defense. So I do think that, he would fit in well in an Ime Udoka-led system. He would mesh with the other guys on the roster. He would fight hard defensively, and he's a movement shooter. He's a guy that you can easily run off some screens, get open, multiple times throughout the course of a game. He's a guy that can spread the floor and be a great release valve for Jalen Green, for Alperen Sengun, and you could very easily get him the minutes. If you're wondering, okay, well, where are you going to get Duncan Robinson his minutes? If you have Dylan Brooks and Jabari Smith Jr. and you've still got Amin Thompson and Tari Eason, the Terror Twins, kind of, and you want to try and get them as many minutes as possible on a nightly basis, right? You want to try and start getting them closer to or even eclipsing 30 minutes on a nightly basis. Well, first off, as long as Jabari Smith Jr.'s minutes continue or as long as his shooting woes continue to happen, then, his minutes could be even further reduced potentially. So there's minutes to be had there. You could also very easily slide Jabari Smith Jr. over to the 5 in certain matchups and open up more minutes that way. Because let's face it, if you do move on from Jock Landale, not every matchup is going to be a great matchup for Steven Adams. He's a very situational big that you want to deploy. But you could throw Jabari Smith Jr. at the 5, let him live there, where also the spacing, the shooting woes are maybe a little bit less of a concern if he's playing at the 5 spot. And teams are still treating him as a threat from the perimeter, even though he's not shooting it well. So the scouting report still treats him as a shooter, which is important for spacing purposes and whatnot. You could very easily throw Duncan Robinson into the mix and get him a very casual, easy 15, maybe 20 minutes a night. And again, for a team that is as bad at shooting the ball as the Houston Rockets are so far this season, I think you have to consider it. I think that if the Miami Heat called up the Rockets and, pitched this deal, or if the Rockets were to reach out to them and propose this offer, I think it makes a lot of sense for both sides. And he's a very plug-and-play type guy. And there could be games where maybe Robinson only gets, 5-10 minutes. There could be games where he gets 15, 20, 25 minutes, right? If he's really killing it, if the Rockets really desperately need the spacing, if other guys just flat out don't have it, it would be a really great depth pickup for the Rockets in an area that they desperately need help in, which again is being able to shoot the damn basketball. So I'm curious your thoughts on this deal. Would you want to see this trade made if you're the Houston Rockets? Coming up, we've got one more trade to get into. This one might be a little bit more divisive amongst Rockets fans. However, we're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, so spent that first segment talking about Duncan Robinson as a potential option. I did fail to mention this, at least so far this season, he's shooting 37.5% from downtown. He's a career 39.7% three-point shooter, though, so just a hair under 40%. And again, coming from a Miami system, coming from, playing under Eric Spoelstra, he's no stranger to playing hard-nosed defense. I do think that he would fit in pretty seamlessly here with the Rockets. It's more so about, is that trade enough value for the Miami Heat? I do think they probably do need a better backup big than what they've got going on right now. And again, Jayshawn Tate provides them yet another serviceable rotation guy in a pinch. But the Heat are also, you might have to fade the Miami Heat this season. They've struggled. Jimmy Butler is not looking great so far to start the year. Bam has had his struggles. It's been a bit of a clown fiesta in Miami. Maybe they turn it around, maybe they don't. And if they don't turn it around, then maybe they are willing to fire sale some of these pieces that they have on their roster. And if that's the case, if we revisit this discussion a month or two from now, rather than the early going of the season, and if the Heat are just completely floundering, then maybe they're willing to get rid of some of their pieces, and you could get away with giving them even less value, right? So we'll have to revisit this discussion a little bit further down the line. But the second trade target that I have here, I already know this one's going to ruffle some feathers. I already know this one's going to be a bit more divisive in just how I crafted the trade. But I'll go ahead and pull it up, and we will drag our way through it and just see what's what. So the second trade target that I have drafted up here for us is Cam Johnson with the Brooklyn Nets. And I have going to the Brooklyn Nets, Steven Adams. And Steven Adams could very easily be replaced with Jock Landale. Financially, whatever, the contracts work. The money works either way with Adams or Jock Landale. And then in addition to the salary filler component of one of the two Rockets backup big men, I have Jabari Smith Jr. Now, that's going to be the one where a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, you're overreacting. It's 12 games in. Jabari will figure it out. He'll get his shot back. You're selling way too low on him. I hear every single one of those arguments. I was one of the founding members of the Jabari Jungle. I was firmly in the camp of thinking that Jabari Smith Jr. should be the Houston Rockets' top target in his draft class. And at this stage, at least, where we are right now with how good Paolo Banchero looks, with how good Chet Holmgren has looked throughout his career, clearly I've been wrong. Now, Jabari is still incredibly young. He still has the rest of his career ahead of him. And it's very possible that what he's got going on right now is just him flat out slumping, and he could turn it around, and he could turn it around and turn into a just flat out knockdown, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40% 3-point shooter, what have you. And this trade could look really ridiculous down the line. As an aside, I do think Cam Johnson could still be gettable without including Jabari Smith Jr., but I'm going to at least operate on this trade for a moment before suggesting an alternative trade avenue. At this point, Jabari Smith Jr. is in a very difficult position with the Houston Rockets, in large part because it just doesn't feel like he is very equipped to be an ancillary piece. In college, he was the guy. In college, he got all the touches. He was involved pretty much every possession down. He had a swagger about him. He had a confidence in his game that has been lost since he really became an NBA player. Now, it shows up occasionally, like going back to that insane comeback that the Rockets had against the Golden State Warriors, right? Jabari looked like his old college self in that game, right? He was a massive part of that Rockets comeback run. He was a big part of it. Was him Tari and Amin, who accounted for 35 of the Rockets' 39 points to force that comeback in the fourth quarter run that they went on to force overtime. Like, you know, there's still flashes there. There's still good moments there. And there, I do still think that there is a serviceable player to be had with Jabari Smith Jr. Now, all that being said is, you know, are the Rockets the best position for him? Is he going to be able to achieve his potential in his current role? And that's, to me, the biggest question mark is Jabari in the way the Rockets are currently constructed, he's not going to get touches. He's not going to get those offensive reps. He's not going to get the opportunity to feel his way out of a slump, to get those touches where he likes the ball in the mid-range, in the mid-post. We really haven't seen the Rockets ever give Jabari that time of day, right? Ime had plenty of opportunities to toy with it, to play with it last season. He's had opportunities to do it so far this season, and we literally have not seen it through almost now. You know, we're closing in on like 100 games of Jabari Smith Jr. playing under Ime Udoka, and there hasn't really been any evidence to suggest that the Rockets want to try and give Jabari a bigger role offensively. They treat him as exclusively a 3-and-D role player. And that just may not be who he is as a player, and he may need an opportunity, a change of scenery, in order to really spread his wings and become the best version of himself. Now, I will still remain adamant that if the Rockets were to give him a little bit more opportunity offensively here, despite the fact that he hasn't really earned it with his play so far this season, with his shot making, you know, I think that's something that could dig him out of this slump that he's in. But there's no signs pointing towards that happening anytime soon. And at that point, if you're going to kind of pigeonhole Jabari into this role that may not be best suited for him, then go and get a player that is suited for that role. Cam Johnson is a guy that can play that role, that can spot up. He doesn't have to get those touches. He can be a spot up shooter. He can be a release valve. He's shooting, what is he shooting so far this season? So far this season, he's shooting 37.6% from beyond the arc. He's a career 39% three-point shooter. And the thing about Cam Johnson is not only is he he's an above average defender, he's a solid defender. He's a knockdown three-point shooter, but he's not just a shooter. Cam Johnson's a flat out scorer. Cam Johnson can put the ball on the floor. He can drive to the rim. He can put the ball, take a 1-2 dribble, quick pull up. He's got a little bit of smoothness to his game, and having a guy like that on a roster that is struggling to score the ball effectively, which the Rockets flat out are this season, could be really beneficial, right? That's the polar opposite of Jabari's game. Like, Jabari doesn't really have a lot of wiggle to his game. He doesn't have a lot of smoothness. He's not really going to put the ball on the floor and create for himself or get to a tough shot and make it. Cam Johnson has that ability. Cam Johnson can be a bucket getter in the right situation, especially if other guys are taking the pressure off him, right? If he is, a tertiary or even the fourth option, on an offensive or in a starting lineup, then that could be where he could really thrive. And you could see a world where Cam Johnson could easily average a really cool 15 to 20 points a game on good efficiency and help the Rockets' shooting woes and help the floor spacing. Now, what you lose if you do make this trade, what you lose in giving up Jabari Smith Jr., you lose the size, you lose the length, you lose the rebounding when he does bring the rebounding, which again, it's a little hit and miss at times, right? There's some nights where Jabari looks like a monster on the glass, and there's other nights where he's serviceable at best. Defensively, I do think he's taken a little bit of a step back this season. Not like a massive step back. It's not like any red flags or anything. It's just, I think the concept of Jabari is this 6'11", 7 feet tall, switchable, versatile defender. It's there in theory, but in practicality, in last game against the Clippers, there were multiple drives where James Harden made it past Jabari with relative ease. And this is a 35-year-old James Harden who has very little burst, very little explosion left in his game. And then on the flip side of it, when Jabari is guarding bigger players, he still doesn't have the beef, the muscle to go up against some bigger guys. So he's still a serviceable defender, but he's also not a flat out lockdown switchable defender. So I do think, right, the concept of Jabari is better than Jabari in practicality or in reality at this stage. And yeah, again, you could look at it and you could say, Jackson, you're completely overreacting. You're selling short. Why are you giving up on Jabari? I can already hear the comments coming in now. You're a hater. He's your new scapegoat for this season. No, he's just underperforming. And the fact of the matter is, this Rockets team is trying to take steps towards winning. And when players are underperforming, that's when you have to make hard decisions. That's when you have to figure out, okay, is this guy getting benched? Is he going to get moved? Is he going to lose his role? And like some fans don't like hearing that conversation, and that's fair. That's fine. If that's not how you want to fan, if that's not how you care about, listening to or talking about the Rockets, I'm not going to try and force that upon you. That's okay. It's your right to fan the way you want to fan. But for me, I try to look at this team and I try to think, okay, well, how can the Rockets maximize their success, right? How can they be the best version of themselves this season? And flat out, if you were to replace Jabari Smith Jr. with Cam Johnson in the Rockets starting lineup this season, Rockets are easily sitting at 10-2 or 11-1 this year because he's clearly been the weakest link offensively. One other element that you lose if you do go that route with moving on from Jabari Smith Jr., you do lose, unfortunately, the ability to play him as your small ball 5. Now, maybe that's not the end of the world because, again, he's still not shooting the basketball the best, so it's not like he's providing a ton of floor spacing anyways. But I would make the argument that as effective as they've been as a tandem and also individually with Tari, Eason, and Amin Thompson, and as great as they are at rebounding, I do think there's a world. Tari Eason's incredibly strong for his size. He's also got a great wingspan about him. I think there's a world where you could easily play Tari Eason as like a small ball 5 and like really go small ball. Like I'm talking like Draymond Green at the 5 for Golden State Warriors style small ball. If Draymond can play the 5, like for significant minutes in Golden State's little death ball whatever lineup for years, and still does it to this day when Steve Kerr wants to throw a haymaker at another team and throw Draymond at the 5, Tari Eason can easily do that. And I think between, Tari and Amin and the other athletes on the Rockets roster, you can easily get away with gang rebounding and having everybody fight as a group. I don't think Jabari's extra, 3 or 4 inches of height makes up a massive difference when Tari Eason is just a flat out better rebounder than Jabari Smith Jr. Amin Thompson's a better rebounder than Jabari Smith Jr. They're both much smaller than he is. So I'm very curious, right? Your thoughts in this argument. Would you entertain the idea of going after Cam Johnson? And I already know two people are going to be like, why is Jackson obsessed with trading for guys from the Brooklyn Nets? Look what happened to Mikal Bridges. And I will walk that one back. I will eat crow on that one, right? The Jalen Green for Mikal Bridges stuff, that would have been a disaster, especially with how bad Mikal Bridges has been this season. The Knicks are playing like 30 points better per 100 possessions when Mikal Bridges is off the floor this season. He has been awful for them. So maybe this will be the next version of that, or maybe it won't be. But I am very curious your thoughts. I do also think that there's a world where Brooklyn, they're playing okay to start this season. They're right now sitting at, where are they sitting at? Where's my standings? I had them pulled up here a second ago. They're 8th in the Eastern Conference at 5-7. That's so embarrassing that the 8th seed is 5-7 in the Eastern Conference. Meanwhile, the 8th seed in the West is 7-5. Yeah, the complete inverse. So I think there's a world where the Nets are eventually going to pivot and tank, and that's the whole reason that they traded Mikal Bridges. I don't think they're going to be winning these games. I do think there's a world where they're probably going to look to offload some of these guys potentially, or just flat out bench them and shut them down for the season so they can stop winning some of these games and actually, pivot towards Cooper Flagg and the NBA draft sweepstakes. So maybe, a guy like Cam Johnson could be had for cheaper down the line, similar to what I said about Duncan Robinson earlier. And if that's the case, then maybe you could get a guy like Cam Johnson without even giving up Jabari Smith Jr. Maybe you could just get him for a future first-round draft pick or something, or a couple future firsts, whatever, if you're willing to part with some future assets to get an impact guy for the rotation this season. But as it stands, right, the Rockets have a 9-10-man deep rotation right now. You'd have to find the minutes for him, and I do think that there's a world where Jabari Smith Jr. still has enough upside that you wouldn't have to attach any additional assets to be able to get that deal done. And I don't know. I'm very curious. Your thoughts. I feel like there's a chance that I get completely flamed for this, and I am ready to accept that heat if that happens. But I also think there's some merit behind this trade. So give me your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Coming up, want to get into some thoughts on Rockets Clippers Part 2, NBA Cup action starting for the Houston Rockets. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5, just $5, and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one spot. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you actually place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And while you're there, take a look at the odds available. Check out their parlay builder, check out the different season awards favorites, or just the outright favorites to win the Super Bowl. Right now, the Chiefs plus 430, the Lions right behind them at plus 460. Then rounding out the top 5, the Ravens plus 600, the Bills plus 800, and the Eagles plus 950. So all those odds and so much more, head on over to FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Okay, so it's going to be Rockets Clippers part 2. Rockets took game 1 of this little mini series, 111-103. And again, just a quick rehash of that if you missed our recap episode, right? It was all Clippers early on. The Terror Twins checked into the game, completely shut down James Harden. They were called the separation factor by Ime Udoka, and they turned the tide of the game. Rockets went on that big run spanning the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. They went up by as many as 19, and then it looked like the game was basically over. Ty Lue had the third stringers in there. He pulled the starters super early, and the third stringers actually mounted kind of a comeback. They made it a 6-point game at one point, and the Rockets were able to hold on and finish out the win. And that's where I want to start, actually. That's kind of one of the downsides here is the Rockets are actually getting ready to start a slate of, I believe it's 3 games in 4 nights here, upcoming here very shortly, because they've got the Clippers here Friday night for Cup action. Then they've got Sunday, they're on the road against the Bulls, and then Monday night on the road against the Bucks. Now, the Bulls, not a great team. You know, they've won some games this season, but that should be a win on paper. The Bucks have been horrendous this season, but you can't ever write off Giannis. He just had a massive 59-point performance, whatever, and that's 3 games in 4 nights. And here's the downside to what happened in game 1 against the Clippers. Because the Rockets couldn't hold on to that lead and couldn't get to the point where they could check in their own third stringers and just coast to the finish line, the Rockets had to leave all their starters in the game. So Jalen Green played extra minutes. Amin Thompson played extra minutes. Fred played extra minutes. Like, all these guys played so much more than the Clippers starters did. And I do think that is, like, at least going to be maybe a small factor, right? The rest component here, where, you know, the Clippers guys got to rest up that fourth quarter, their starters, so they should be a little bit more fresh coming into this game, so that's definitely something to monitor. How's the energy at the start of this game, right? Do the Clippers come out with a little bit more oomph in their step because they got a little bit more rest, and the Rockets had to run their starters a little bit more ragged to close out that game? Again, Jalen Green played like the final, what was it, like 14 minutes straight or something of that game, which is one of the reasons that he wound up missing like his last like 4 3-pointers in a row or something. At least that's what I chalked it up to, is, you know, dead legs. So they've had a day off, right? So maybe I'm overblowing it. Maybe the rest component isn't going to be a factor, but that is something to consider as you navigate the NBA season. Fred VanVleet, again, he had that little bit of hamstring tightness that kept him out of the Wizards game. So Fred is especially a guy that you don't want to be giving unnecessary minutes to, especially considering the fact that he's been in a bit of a shooting slump. You want to make sure he's as fresh as possible, that he's got fresh legs, that he's healthy to be able to be the best version of himself. So that was a bit disappointing from last game and how it could potentially impact this next game. Now, I do fully expect the Clippers to come out and, you know, they basically just rolled over when it came to the Rockets' defensive scheme of throwing Alperen Sengun on Chris Dunn defensively in this last game, and it worked for the most part. Like, it kept Alperen Sengun out of a lot of the actions that involved Zubac. But at the same time, I'm very curious to see what Ty Lue decides to do. Maybe we see a switch up with the Clippers starting lineup. Maybe he decides to pull Chris Dunn and plug in somebody else in the starting lineup. Maybe he goes with Terrence Mann, who had kind of broken out of his slump this last game, hit 2 of 3 from downtown, 14 points off the bench. Mann had been the starter for the Clippers all season up until literally the game before, where Chris Dunn got the starting nod over Terrence Mann. So maybe he switches back and goes back to Terrence Mann in the starting lineup. Zubac had a really rough game because of how the Rockets decided to defend a lot of those actions. It really shut down the 2-man game, the pick and roll action between Zoo and James Harden. I would imagine that they're not going to settle for that this time around. In fact, on a lot of those switches, instead of getting to like the straight up pick and roll actions and trying to hit hit Zoo on the roll, I'd be shocked if we didn't see the Clippers try to establish him in post position this game. Because if you're going to have Jabari as the primary on Zubats, I mean, I think Zubac wins that matchup like 8 or 9 times out of 10 on the low block, and would, the Rockets would be forced to double team, and then that would lead to kick out opportunities and open 3-point opportunities for the Clippers offensively. So we're going to see how the Clippers ultimately adjust to what happened in game 1 against the Rockets. And here's the downside for Houston. Realistically, I don't expect them to shoot 37.5% again. Like, that was their best 3-point shooting percentage of the season, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they've had a better 3-point shooting percentage so far this year. The Rockets did leave some points at the free throw line. They got there 17 times. They only hit 12 of them, so only a smidge over 70% or 70.5% at the line. But this Clippers team is a good offensive team, right? And even though the Rockets were firmly in control of this game going into exiting the third quarter, and they were carrying that big lead in the fourth quarter, they didn't get a great, like across the board, the Clippers starters really struggled. And a big part of that was the defense from the Terror Twins, how good Amin Thompson and Tari Eason were at blowing things up this game. But you can also chalk some of that up to off shooting nights for James Harden, off shooting night for Norm Powell, who shot only 5 of 18, only had 13 points, had a few turnovers in there. Again, a very quiet night for Zubac. So, this feels like a bit of a trap game, right? Where the Rockets took game 1, had landed, Clippers landed a good first punch in game 1. Rockets responded in a really big way. And then the Clippers made that late run with their third stringers. They found some energy there. I'm sure that was a bit of a wake up call too, to the starters for Ty Lue. And I'm sure JVG was over there pissed on the bench, tearing into the starters, not giving the proper effort. It feels like a bit of a trap game coming to this one where, the Rockets, just because you won game 1, don't walk into game 2 expecting to be able to walk away with the win. You're going to have to come out, and I would love to see the Rockets hit first, right? I'd love to see them come out and have a strong opening quarter, because we've seen a lot of games recently where it feels like the starters don't have the right energy, where they're coming out a little flat to start these games, and they basically have to wait until Amin and Tari check in, and then those guys bring it's like a shot of lightning, and suddenly the Rockets come to life once those guys check into the game. It would be great if the Rockets starters could actually get off to a good start in this game, and then Amin and Tari can check in with a 5-point, 10-point lead, whatever, and then build on that lead rather than having to dig the Rockets back out of a deficit that was created by the starters. The other thing that I'm really hoping we see from this game, two things from this one. Please, I want to see Fred get back to shooting the basketball like he's supposed to. He's been so inconsistent this season. Last game, he missed his first 5 or 6 shots. Then he hit 4 or 5 shots in a row, and then he missed a bunch of shots in a row. He's been so wildly inconsistent. If we could get another good Fred game, I think that would go a long way, especially with it being cup action, the stakes being a little bit higher in this game. Alperen Sengun missed a lot of easy shots, a lot of shots that he would normally hit in this game, and he needs to be able to hit those shots, especially against Zubac, because Zubac is going to stay in a deep drop. He's going to stay back near the rim, and so the mid-range is going to be open for Alp. That little push shot that he likes to take in the paint is going to be open for him, and the 3 is going to be open for him. Now, I don't want Sengun sitting on the 3-point line, getting up 3, 4, 5 attempts from deep. That's not his game. He shouldn't have to do that, but operating out of the short roll when he's on the way to the basket, right? Rather than trying to rumble and crash your way all the way to the hoop, stop and pop for that little push shot. Make sure you're hitting your mid-range. That shot should be there for Sengun in this game. And I feel like he doesn't often have 2 back-to-back really bad shooting performances. Again, only 6 of 14 last game. I could see a big kind of offensive bounce-back performance for him in this one, especially if he's going to be given those wide-open opportunities. And look, once Sengun hits 1 or 2 of those middies, right? It's going to force Zoo to come out further away from the paint. And then that's when Sengun can really look to get Zoo in some foul trouble, right? He can drive on him. He can, try to get to the little James Harden, up and under sweep through with the arms. And that'll be, Hollins was talking about a lot on the broadcast, right? Zoo is not a guy that you want to put your back to. He's not a guy that you want to try and post up. That's not where Sengun's strength is in that matchup. You want to face him up. You want to attack him in space. That's the best thing for Sengun in this matchup. And then last one here. It's just I'm gonna be praying for it every game. And I know I just tried to trade him a segment ago, but hopefully Jabari Smith Jr. can break out of the slump, right? Like it almost feels like we're due for a good Jabari Smith Jr. shooting game at this point, and I just feel like it would move mountains for him, right? To be able to have a good shooting performance, for him to be able to get out of his head a little bit, knock down a few threes, and just be able to walk away from a game feeling good about his offensive contributions. And back to the point about the Rockets starters getting off to a good start, Jabari hitting shots is pretty pivotal for the Rockets people to get off to a good start, right? Because if Jalen and Sengun are attracting double teams, if they're collapsing the defense, if they're doing what they are supposed to be doing and kicking the ball out, Jabari's got to hit shots. Fred has to hit shots, right? Those two guys have been distinctly slacking so far this season. So when you have 2/5 of the Rockets starting lineup struggling, shooting well under 30% for the year from beyond the arc, it's no wonder the offense looks so bad at times. Dylan Brooks has still been a little under league average, but he's been much better than those two guys. And then, Jalen struggled too, but Jalen's also responsible for initiating a lot of the offense. So like, he's not, I'm not going to hold him to, or it's a different standard for Jalen, different expectations, whatever. Fred and Jabari just need to knock down shots, and that would be a pleasant surprise. But if the Rockets can't knock down their shots this game, right? If they can't go point for point with the Clippers from beyond the arc, where are they going to make up that point differential? That's my biggest question. And I really don't know where. I don't know how they're going to make up the point differential. They're going to have to rely again on crashing the offensive glass, getting those second and third opportunities. Getting to the free throw line more would be helpful. But this is going to be an issue throughout the rest of this season, is teams that shoot the three ball well and shoot a lot of threes, the Rockets are going to struggle at the end of the day to outmath some of their opponents. If the Clippers hit 15 threes again, or they hit 14 in game one, if they hit 14 threes again, and if the Rockets suddenly regress and go back to what they've been shooting this season, and they hit less than 10, 5, 6, 7, whatever, and they barely connect from long distance, that is going to be a potentially insurmountable deficit as far as just, the Clippers being plus however many points that is from long distance. And the Rockets are going to have to somehow close that gap by either dominating the paint inside, which is, not easy to do against Zubac, or making it up at the free throw line or with second chance opportunities where they're just going to have to knock down their mid-range shots. You've got to have some kind of an offensive edge against other teams. And right now the Rockets' offensive edge is, frankly, it's their defense. It's their ability to force turnovers, get out in transition, run, offensive glass, the rebounds, the second chance points. That is kind of their offensive edge at this point. It'll be interesting to see if they're able to rely on that in this game, or if they have to rely on it if the three-point shooting goes back down. I'm predicting a Rockets win, though. I feel good about it. My last prediction, I don't think KPJ gets any minutes. He was awful in game one. I would not be shocked if he racks up a DNP here in game two, especially given the emotional circumstances against his former team, the weight, the pressure of an in-season tournament game, all that good stuff. But should be a really fun matchup. Give me your predictions. Give me your thoughts on the two trades that we talked about in the YouTube comments. Remember, the best way you can help us grow our show, listen every single day on your preferred podcast platform. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Drop us a comment while you're there. Subscribe to the daily newsletter. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.